I thought I would use the power of song for this one. In the first Labour U-turn after promising support in 2022, deserting the waspy women.
I'm afraid to say the taxpayer simply can't afford the tens of billions of pounds in compensation when the evidence does show that 90% of those impacted did know about it. That's because of the state of our economy.
In the second Labour U-turn, despite the mention in the manifesto, removal of pensioners' winter fuel. In the third Labour U-turn, after promising to do the opposite, increase in employers' NI.
We will not raise tax on working people. No tax rises for income tax, for national insurance, for VAT.
We will not raise income tax.
In the fourth Labour U-turn, after refusing a national grooming gang inquiry, Labour conceded defeat.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right.
In the fifth U-turn, in the first Labour once-in-a-Parliament budget, the Chancellor promised not to ask for more.
In terms of whether we would be doing something similar in the future, no. This was a budget to reset. It means our public finances are now on a firm footing and the trajectory of public spending is much more honest. So we're never going to need to do a budget like this again. This was a once-in-a-Parliament reset so that we start on the right foot. And also to give businesses, families and markets confidence that we now do have our public finances on a firm footing.
In the sixth Labour U-turn, a £28 billion Green Pledge, Labour ditched it because it would bankrupt the country.
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
In the seventh Labour U-turn, and one of the most significant of all, ditching plans for welfare reform. In the eighth Labour U-turn, which would be in breach of their manifesto, the Chancellor reversed a hinted income tax rise.
To break the cycle of austerity, we need a fair and a sustainable tax system, one that generates revenues to fund the public services that we all use and supports investment to grow our economy. That does mean that today I am asking everyone to make a contribution. The previous Conservative government froze personal tax thresholds from 2021 to 2028. And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level for a further 3 years from 2028.
In the ninth Labour U-turn, after vowing to keep the two-child benefit cap, at the last budget it was scrapped.
Not changing that policy.
You're not changing the two-child policy benefits, OK?
We are lifting 450,000 children out of poverty with the end of the two-child limit.
In the 10th Labour U-turn, in a manifesto commitment to employment rights, Labour ditched its pledge. In the 11th Labour U-turn, in Labour's inheritance tax raid on farmers, ministers were forced to raise the threshold.
Breaking news this afternoon, there's been a miracle at Christmas for British farmers. Now, Keir Starmer has sensationally done a U-turn. He's watered down Labour's inheritance tax raid. The threshold will now rise from £1 million to £2.5 million from April next year.
And in the 12th Labour U-turn, expected to be announced, a reversal of removal of business rates relief.
And I will support the Great British Pub through our new national licensing framework, encouraging councils to back our pubs and to back late-night venues with greater freedoms. For business rates, I will introduce permanently lower tax rates for over 750,000 retail, hospitality and leisure properties, the lowest rates since 1991.
In the 12th Labour U-turns of the Labour government, Starmer said to be
business rate relief removal, increasing family farm inheritance tax thresholds,
ditching employment rights bill pledges,
scrapping the two-child benefit, dilly-dallying with the markets,
Ditching welfare reforms.
Abandoning a 28 billion Green Pledge.
Coming back for more.
A national grooming gangs inquiry.
Increasing national insurance.
Removement of Pence's winter fuel.
Deserting the waspy women.
I think that covers it.
Right, how to follow that?
There you go. Annoying. Right. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. In the Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, are U-turns the sign of strength or weakness? Labour Chairman Anna Turley insists the Prime Minister is in touch with the public as the Chancellor prepares a pubs tax climb down. And then in the Great British debate, I'm asking, should Denmark give Donald Trump Greenland? The US President says it's necessary, otherwise Russia or China will take it. And could King Charles and the Prince Harry's feud be coming to a rapid conclusion? There are reports today that the Duke of Sussex will offer his father a major olive branch. All of that is on the way. As ever, your thoughts, your comments, gbnews.com/your say, or scan the QR code you see on the screen. Well, Stella, did you enjoy that? I hope you did. Joining me, political commentator Stella Pantakedu. Stella, you see, we went through the list. I may have missed something. It's not totally exactly in order. But are we fair to say that there has been a lot of toing and froing and going backwards and forth and pretty much going backwards with the Labour Party?
No, I think it is unfair because I think everybody's calling these policy changes U-turns, but what it actually is governing. And that's what it means to govern in the UK in 2026 now. Because what is happening, really, is Labour is seeing the reality of having to govern a country that is fiscally completely hollowed out. Because after 14 years of very poor public investment, what you have is people who simply do not have, they have seen their wages being completely stagnant, and they're really struggling. Everybody's struggling. Whichever sector you look at, people are struggling. And with the business rates for pubs, for example, which is the latest U-turn, you were going to have this anyway. This was going to come to an end at the end of April anyway. The reason why the government had to react is because the hospitality sector is struggling so much that it is in danger to collapse when what was essentially an emergency pandemic measure was going to come to an end. And I think this is the real story. How comes our hospitality industry is so fragile? What happened to make our hospitality industry so fragile that they need to have an emergency measure?
I can answer that, Stella. It's COVID, wasn't it? That's what happened. That's what made the thing so fragile, which is why they put the business rates relief in place, which is why they did it. And seeing as the industries haven't fully recovered, seems very unwise for Labour to do what they're planning to do. And they would have calculated that if they did that, then there'll be a large portion of the pub industry would go bankrupt. And anybody who's got any half a brain would have been able to calculate that. It is the same with VAT on private schools, which was in their manifesto, which is why I didn't mention it. And also they didn't U-turn on it, which is one that they should have done, which they anticipated a £1.6 billion tax take. But, of course, it didn't turn out that way because, well, over 100 private schools were closed and 25,000 students were sent to other schools because of the closure. Many teachers lost their jobs, and, of course, the ripple effect of other businesses that would lean on those schools and work alongside those schools also closed. It just seems that there are many, many decisions that they're coming up with, and they haven't calculated the unintended consequences, or they're using variables to estimate what they'll earn in income with variables that they have no control of.
I disagree with you, especially on the private schools point, because a lot of these schools were going to close anyway. So it wasn't that the VAT changes changed. Well, and also, private school fees have been increasing for many, many years over and above inflation, and we haven't seen demand for them change dramatically. So I don't think that it is VAT that would make that big of a difference. I think the actual problem is...
just to come back on the private schools, if that was the case with the private schools, which it isn't, because many cite the VAT as the final straw, if the Labour government were aware of how precarious the situation was, why on earth then put in a policy that would tilt the scale and tip everything over like a game of Jenga. It doesn't make any sense. They obviously weren't aware because they hadn't even done a proper assessment, as we learned later.
They haven't U-turned on private schools, VAT, and I think this is a good policy, and I'm glad that they stuck with it. But if we go back on the actual topic, which is the U-turn, the reason why I think all of these industries are struggling, like the hospitality industry, is very simple. People no longer have the discretionary spending that they used to have, and that is because wages have been stagnant for the last decade, and it is really only the top 10% of the country that is seeing an increase in their quality of life and the amount of money that they have to spend.
Well, you know that, and I know that, so why doesn't the Labour government know that?
They
know, which they should do, that there's a stagnant situation where people aren't going to pubs very often, and that is something that's been going on for some time. Why on earth would you slap on ridiculous rates on pubs with a ridiculous multiplier that would put some of them out of business?
One thing that both the media and the political class of the UK is struggling with is that very often there is no perfect solution and no perfect answer to a policy problem that is going to satisfy everyone. And this is why you see such a big difficulty with any government of any colour to stick to a long-term decision. And you see that most with the welfare changes, for example, because to change welfare, the welfare of this country systematically and in the deep way that we actually need to change it, they would need to do some long-term investment. So that would require some money up front, which the Labour Party is starting to do now. They are trying to do that. And this is why they had to do the U-turn on the welfare changes, because, yes, if you ask any Labour MP, they will tell you the welfare budget needs to go down. We want people to be working. We don't want people to depend on benefits. But the how you do this is a whole other conversation. And sadly, we do not have the kind of political and media environment where these kinds of long-term significant debates can take place.
What about the £28 billion U-turn on the Green policy pledge then? When they realised they worked out that they were told that actually that would destabilise the markets and bankrupt the country. What's the answer for that one? Surely they could have worked that out.
This has to do with the situation worldwide, right? So with the supply chains and...
No. The Green Energy Pledge was their pledge to spend £28 billion on building the green jobs and the whole green industry. But the markets got spooked because they realised that it would destabilise them because we couldn't afford it and it would bankrupt the country. If they'd done their sums and maths, they would have worked that out.
Well, they are continuing to invest in our energy infrastructure massively, but I think that what I said initially is still correct. You have to adapt to what's happening in the world, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of things were more expensive. They have to take into consideration what's happening around the world. They have to take into consideration what is happening in the US, what's happening with China, and all of these things will have an impact on big decisions about big budget spending.
They couldn't have done that whilst they were in opposition or before they made this pledge. Look, I think you've done a sterling job trying to defend them. I think it's indefensible. But I wonder, so do you think then 12 U-turns, and these are only the ones that I was able to remember and put down, there will have been others, and I couldn't get it fully in the right order because they happened in such succession that it was difficult to make sure. But do you think that this is a sign of stable, strong government with U-turns, so many U-turns in such a short space of time? Do you think what does it mean?
I would be worried if there was a government which did not have the confidence to change their policy positions when the facts changed or when they had sustainable consultations, when they have significant consultations with stakeholders.
All right.
I would be really worried.
Well, I'd be really worried with the government that seems to turn back on absolutely everything they've ever come up with, and this seems to be the government we've got. Stella Fantakadu, you did a great job. I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.